Dust swirled around Daisy Lawrence's ankles as she dangled helplessly from the porch post, the rough rope cutting into her wrists. The blazing Montana sun beat down on her head, and thirst clawed at her throat like a wild animal. She had been hanging there for nearly 2 hours now, punishment for refusing to cook breakfast for her husband's drunken friends after they had burst in at dawn, demanding food after a night of gambling and whiskey. Montana Territory, 1875. Daisy had been married to Frank Lawrence for just over a year, and every day of that year had been worse than the one before. When she'd agreed to marry him in a desperate bid to escape poverty after her parents died, she never imagined he would reveal himself to be a monster once the vows were spoken. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her raise her head, though the effort cost her dearly. A lone rider approached the small homestead, his form shimmering in the heat waves rising from the dusty ground. Daisy felt a flash of shame, knowing how she must look tied to her own porch like an animal. Perhaps it was a neighbor who would ride on by, pretending not to see her predicament as so many had done before. But the rider slowed, then stopped altogether. He dismounted with fluid grace that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. As he approached, Daisy could make out a tall, broad-shouldered figure, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. "Madam." His voice was deep, concerned. "Are you all right?" Daisy couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped her cracked lips. "Do I look all right to you, mister?" The stranger stepped closer, and she could see him clearly now weathered face, kind eyes, a jawline shadowed with several days' worth of beard. He wasn't young, perhaps 30 or so, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "My husband," Daisy replied, the words tasting like poison. "He didn't care for my refusal to cook for him and his drunken friends this morning." The stranger's jaw tightened. "Where is he now?" "In town with those same friends. They won't be back until sundown, most likely." Without another word, the man pulled a knife from his belt and cut through the ropes binding her to the post. Daisy collapsed forward, her legs weak from standing so long, and he caught her easily in strong arms. "Easy now," he murmured, helping her to sit on the porch steps. He produced a canteen from his saddlebag and offered it to her. "Drink slowly." The water was warm, but felt like heaven on her parched throat. She took small sips as he'd instructed, fighting the urge to gulp it down. "Thank you," she managed after a moment.
"I'm Daisy Lawrence."
"Griff Taylor," he replied, crouching before her with concern in his eyes. "Most folks call me Griff." Daisy tried to stand, but her legs were still unsteady. "I should get inside. If Frank comes back and sees you've cut me loose." "I'll handle your husband if he returns," Griff said firmly. "Right now, you need to rest and get some food in you." He helped her to her feet. "Is there somewhere you can go? Family nearby?" Daisy shook her head. "No one." Frank made sure of that. Griff's expression darkened as he helped her inside the small cabin. The interior was neat, but sparse: a table with 4 chairs, a small stove, a bed in the corner separated by a thin curtain. "Sit," he instructed, guiding her to a chair. "I'll fix you something to eat." "You don't have to do that," Daisy protested weakly. "I'll cook, you rest," he said simply, already moving to examine the contents of her small pantry. Daisy watched in stunned silence as this stranger, this cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere, moved around her kitchen with surprising competence, finding flour, salt pork, and dried beans. He built up the fire in the stove and set water to boil. "How long has he been treating you this way?" Griff asked, his back to her as he worked. Daisy stared at her hands, at the red welts where the ropes had bitten into her flesh. "It started small. A shove here. Harsh words there. Got worse after the winter set in.
This."
She gestured to her wrists. "This is new. He's never tied me up before." Griff nodded, his shoulders tense. "And no family to go back to?" "My parents died of fever 2 winters ago." Frank seemed kind then. Offered marriage security. She gave a hollow laugh. Some security. They fell silent as Griff continued cooking. Soon, the small cabin filled with the aroma of cornbread and beans with salt pork. He set a plate before her along with a cup of coffee. Eat, he encouraged, slowly. Daisy hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite touched her tongue. She forced herself to eat carefully, not wanting to make herself sick. "Why are you helping me?" she asked between bites. "You don't know me." Griff sat across from her with his own plate. "My sister was married to a man like your Frank. No one helped her." His eyes grew distant. "She didn't survive it." Daisy set down her fork. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. But I swore I'd never stand by if I saw someone else in the same situation." He looked at her directly. "You can't stay here, Mrs. Lawrence." "I have nowhere to go," she replied, the familiar hopelessness washing over her. "I'm heading to Silver Creek. It's a few days' ride north. There's work there and no one would know you." Daisy stared at him. "Are you suggesting I just leave with you? A stranger?" "I'm suggesting you save your own life," he replied evenly. "Whether it's with me or not is your choice. But staying here." He shook his head. "Men like your husband don't get better. They get worse." The truth of his words cut through her like a knife. Frank had been escalating, each punishment more severe than the last. How long before he went too far? "If I go with you," she began hesitantly, "I'll see you safely to Silver Creek and help you find work." Nothing more expected. His eyes held hers steadily. "You have my word." Before Daisy could respond, the sound of horses approaching made them both freeze. Frank was back early. "Go out the back," Daisy whispered urgently. "If he finds you here, I'm not leaving you to face him," Griff said, rising to his feet. "Please," she begged. "He's not alone. There will be 4 or 5 of them, all armed." Griff hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but I'll be close. If things get bad, I'll intervene." He moved to the back door, then paused. "Think about what I said. I'll wait at the creek bend past the big oak until midnight. If you decide to leave, meet me there." Then he was gone, slipping out just as the front door banged open. Frank Lawrence stood in the doorway, swaying slightly, his face flushed with alcohol and the heat. Behind him, Daisy could see 2 of his friends lounging against their horses. "Well, look who got herself free," Frank slurred, his eyes narrowing as they landed on the 2 plates on the table. "And who's been keeping you company, wife?" Daisy's heart pounded. "No one. I was hungry." Frank moved faster than she expected, grabbing her by the hair. "Don't lie to me. Who was here?" "No one," she insisted, wincing as he twisted his grip. He shoved her hard, sending her sprawling to the floor. "You think I'm stupid? 2 plates. 2 cups." He kicked one of the chairs, sending it crashing into the wall. "You're entertaining men while I'm gone?" "No," Daisy cried, scrambling backward as he advanced on her. "Frank, come on." One of his friends called from outside. "We got business in town." "Shut up," Frank snapped, not taking his eyes off Daisy. "My wife needs a lesson in loyalty." He unbuckled his belt and pulled it free with a hissing sound that made Daisy's blood run cold. She'd felt that belt before. "Please, Frank," she whispered. "I was just hungry." "You'll be hungry for a week when I'm done with you," he growled, raising the belt. The first blow never fell. The back door burst open, and Griff was there, moving with the speed and precision of a mountain lion. He caught Frank's wrist mid-swing and twisted, forcing the belt from his grasp. Frank howled in pain and surprise. "Who the hell?" Griff's fist connected with Frank's jaw, cutting off his words and sending him staggering backward. "The lady said please," Griff said coldly. "Where I come from, that means you stop." Frank's friends had rushed in at the commotion, but they hesitated at the sight of Griff, tall, imposing, and radiating deadly calm. "This ain't your business, stranger," one of them said, hand hovering near his gun. "I'm making it my business," Griff replied without taking his eyes off Frank, who was spitting blood onto the floor. "You're dead," Frank snarled, lunging forward. What followed was brief, but brutal. Frank might have been younger, but Griff clearly had experience in fights that mattered. He sidestepped Frank's wild swing and delivered 2 precise blows, one to the stomach that doubled Frank over, and another to the temple that sent him crashing to the floor, unconscious. Frank's friends backed toward the door. "Take him with you," Griff instructed, his voice level but leaving no room for argument. "And tell him when he wakes up that if he ever comes near Mrs. Lawrence again, what happened today will seem like a gentle conversation compared to what I'll do to him." The men hesitated, then grudgingly dragged Frank's limp form outside. Daisy heard them struggling to get him onto his horse, cursing under their breath. When the sound of hoofbeats had faded, Daisy finally exhaled. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered, though her heart wasn't in the admonishment. "He'll be back with more men. All the more reason for you to be gone before that happens," Griff replied, offering his hand to help her up. "Will you come with me to Silver Creek?" Daisy looked around the small cabin that had been her prison for the past year. What was keeping her here? Fear? Habit? "I need to pack," she said, making her decision. "It won't take long." Relief flashed across Griff's face. "We should move quickly. We'll want to put as much distance between us and this place as possible before nightfall." Daisy nodded and moved behind the curtain to gather her few belongings. She had little to show for her marriage: 2 dresses besides the one she wore, a shawl her mother had knitted, a small box containing a locket with her parents' pictures. She wrapped everything in a shawl and emerged to find Griff gathering food supplies. "My horse can carry both of us until we can find you a mount in the next town," he said, stuffing cornbread and dried meat into a sack. Daisy hesitated. "I have no money to pay for a horse." Frank kept every penny. Griff waved away her concern. "I have enough. We'll manage." 20 minutes later, they were riding away from the cabin, Daisy seated behind Griff on his sturdy bay gelding. She didn't look back at the place that had never been a home. They rode hard for several hours, following game trails rather than the main road, just in case Frank and his friends decided to pursue them. By sunset, they had covered impressive ground, putting miles of Montana wilderness between them and the nightmare Daisy was leaving behind. They made camp in a small clearing near a stream. Griff efficiently set up a simple camp, starting a small, low fire that wouldn't attract attention. "We'll stay here tonight," he said, laying out a bedroll for her.
"Get some rest. I'll keep watch."
"You need sleep too," Daisy protested. "I'm used to short nights. Been on the trail a long time." He settled with his back against a tree, rifle across his knees. "I'll wake you at dawn." Daisy wanted to argue further, but exhaustion overtook her. The emotional and physical toll of the day caught up all at once, and she fell into a deep sleep almost as soon as she lay down. She woke to the smell of coffee and found Griff crouched by a freshly built fire, frying strips of bacon in a small pan. "Morning," he greeted her. "Sleep well?" Daisy sat up, surprised to realize she had indeed slept through the night without the nightmares that usually plagued her. "Better than I have in months," she admitted. He handed her a cup of coffee. "Good. We've got a long ride ahead." As they ate a simple breakfast, Daisy studied her unlikely rescuer in the morning light. His features were strong rather than handsome, with a nose that had clearly been broken at least once, and a scar that ran along his jawline. His eyes were a clear hazel, observant and intelligent. "Tell me about Silver Creek," she said, curious about the place that might become her new home. "It's a growing town. Not too big, not too small. Started as a mining settlement, but's expanding now.
Good folks, mostly.
The kind who mind their own business." He sipped his coffee. "I've been working as a guide and hunter for the area." taking prospectors into the mountains, bringing back game for the town. And there's work for women? He nodded. The hotel needs help. So does the general store. And there's a new schoolhouse looking for a teacher. I was training to be a teacher before my parents died, Daisy said softly, surprised to be sharing this long-buried dream. I never finished my studies. Griff looked thoughtful. Silver Creek might be just the place to pick that up again. Town's growing. Lots of families with children. Why are you doing this? Daisy asked suddenly. Taking such a risk for a stranger? Griff was quiet for a long moment. Like I said, my sister, I know about your sister, Daisy interrupted gently. But that doesn't explain why you're willing to risk your life for me. Frank and his friends won't just let this go. He stared into the fire. Maybe I'm tired of seeing good people suffer when I could do something about it. He looked up at her. And maybe I'm tired of traveling alone. There was nothing improper in his words or his gaze, just honest weariness, and perhaps a touch of the same loneliness that Daisy herself felt. She nodded, understanding more than she could express. They broke camp efficiently and continued their journey north. The day was spent alternating between hard riding and periodic rest for the horse. Griff proved to be a man of few words, but was attentive to Daisy's comfort, ensuring she had enough water and stopping when he sensed she needed a break, though she never complained. By late afternoon, they reached a small trading post where, true to his word, Griff purchased a sturdy mare for Daisy. The trader, a grizzled old man with a missing eye, asked no questions about why a woman was traveling with a man who wasn't her husband. He simply counted the money Griff handed over and helped them load supplies onto the horses. You ride well, Griff observed as they continued their journey, now each on their own mount. My father raised horses, Daisy explained. I grew up riding. Frank. She hesitated. Frank didn't approve of women on horseback. Said it wasn't proper. Griff snorted. Nothing proper about the way he treated you. They made better time with 2 horses, covering ground quickly across the rolling Montana landscape. As the sun began to set on their second day of travel, Griff led them to a sheltered spot near a small, rocky outcropping. We're making good progress, he said as they made camp. Another 2 days should see us to Silver Creek. Daisy nodded, trying to ignore the anxiety building within her. What would she do when they reached the town? How would she support herself? What if Frank came looking for her? As if reading her thoughts, Griff spoke. You're worried about what happens when we get there. It wasn't a question, but Daisy nodded anyway. I have no money, no references, nothing but the clothes on my back. You have skills and intelligence, Griff countered. And you'll have a friend in town.
Me.
And what will people think? A woman arriving with a man who isn't her husband. Griff shrugged. Silver Creek isn't like other towns. People there have their own pasts, their own secrets. They don't pry. They ate a simple dinner of beans and jerky, with the last of the cornbread they'd brought from Daisy's cabin. As night fell fully, the temperature dropped, and Daisy pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Here, Griff said, noticing her discomfort. He removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders. I can't take your coat, she protested. You'll freeze. I've got a blanket, he replied easily. And I'm used to the cold. The coat was warm from his body and smelled of leather, wood smoke, and something distinctly Griff. Daisy pulled it closer, grateful for both the warmth and the kindness. Thank you, she said softly. Not just for the coat. For everything. Griff nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable with her gratitude. Get some sleep. I'll take first watch. Wake me for second watch, Daisy insisted. You need rest too. He looked like he might argue, but finally nodded.
All right.
In a few hours, Daisy curled up in her bedroll, Griff's coat still wrapped around her. As she drifted towards sleep, she realized she felt safe for the first time in over a year. The revelation brought tears to her eyes, but they were tears of relief rather than sorrow. She woke some time later to Griff gently shaking her shoulder. "Your turn to watch," he said quietly. "Sun'll be up in about 3 hours. Wake me then." Daisy sat up, immediately alert. "Anything I should look out for?" "Just keep an eye on the horses. They'll let you know if anything's wrong." He handed her his rifle. "You know how to use this?" She nodded. "My father taught me." Griff seemed satisfied with her answer and settled into his own bedroll. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out in sleep. Daisy sat with her back against a rock, rifle across her lap, watching the moonlit landscape. The night was peaceful, with only the occasional hoot of an owl or rustle of small animals in the underbrush. She found herself studying Griff as he slept, his face relaxed in a way it never was when he was awake. Who was this man who had risked everything to help her? He'd mentioned his sister, but gave few other details about his past. He was clearly educated, despite his rough exterior. His speech was proper, his manners refined when he chose to display them. There was a story there, she was certain. The night passed without incident, and Daisy woke Griff as the eastern sky began to lighten. He came awake instantly, a trait she suspected came from years of sleeping in the wilderness. "All quiet?" he asked, sitting up. "Not even a coyote," she confirmed. "Just peaceful." He nodded approvingly. "You make a good lookout." They ate a quick breakfast and were on the move as the sun crested the horizon. The third day of travel took them through increasingly rugged country, with pine forests giving way to steeper, rocky terrain. "We're skirting the mountains," Griff explained as they navigated a narrow trail. "Silver Creek lies in a valley on the other side of this ridge." By midday, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, and a cool wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. "Storm coming," Griff observed, glancing at the sky. "We should find shelter before it hits." They pushed on, searching for suitable cover. The first fat raindrops began to fall just as Griff spotted an abandoned line shack tucked against the base of a cliff. "There," he pointed. "We can wait out the storm." They urged their horses forward, reaching the small cabin just as the heavens opened. Rain pounded on the roof as they led the horses into a lean-to attached to the side of the shack. The interior of the cabin was dusty but intact. A small stone fireplace dominated one wall, and rough-hewn furniture, a table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed filled the single room. "Not much, but it'll keep us dry," Griff said, shaking water from his hat. He immediately set about building a fire, while Daisy explored their temporary shelter. "Looks like whoever lived here left in a hurry," she observed, finding a few abandoned items, a dented coffee pot, some tins of food on a shelf, a worn blanket. "Probably a prospector who gave up," Griff replied, coaxing flames from the kindling he'd gathered. "These shacks, the territory. Men build them, use them for a season, then move on when they don't strike it rich." The fire brought welcome warmth to the small space. Daisy set the coffee pot to boil while Griff examined the tins of food, discarding those that had bulged with age, but finding a few that seemed safe. "Beans and peaches," he announced, setting the usable tins on the table. "Better than nothing." The storm showed no signs of abating as they shared their simple meal. Rain lashed at the windows, and wind howled around the corners of the cabin. Occasional flashes of lightning illuminated the room, followed by booming thunder. "We might be here for the night," Griff said, peering out the window at the darkening sky. "These mountain storms can last." Daisy nodded, trying to ignore the impropriety of spending the night alone in such close quarters with a man who wasn't her husband. But then, she reminded herself, her husband was the one she needed protection from. As if sensing her discomfort, Griff spoke. "I'll sleep by the fire. You take the bed." "Thank you," she said, grateful for his consideration. To pass the time, Griff pulled a deck of cards from his saddlebag, and they played several hands of poker, using beans as chips. Daisy surprised him by winning consistently. "My father taught me," she explained with a small smile. "Said a woman should know how to recognize when a man is bluffing." Griff laughed, a rich sound that transformed his serious face. Wise man, your father. As evening deepened into night, the storm finally began to ease. The rain gentled to a steady patter, and the wind died down to occasional gusts. Tell me about your sister, Daisy said suddenly, as they sat by the fire. If you don't mind speaking of her. Griff was quiet for so long that Daisy thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but clear. Her name was Grace. She was younger than me by 4 years. Smartest person I ever knew. Could recite Shakespeare from memory and calculate figures faster than any banker. His face softened at the memory. Our parents died when I was 20 and she was 16. I did my best to provide for her, but it was hard. When Joseph Thornton came courting, he seemed like a good match. Wealthy, educated, respected in the community. He poked at the fire, sending sparks up the chimney. They married, and at first things seemed fine. But then I started noticing changes in her. She grew quiet, jumped at loud noises, made excuses not to see me. His jaw tightened. When I finally confronted her, she admitted that Thornton had a temper, that he hurt her when he drank, which was often. Daisy's heart ached for the young woman and for Griff, seeing parallels to her own situation. I tried to convince her to leave, Griff continued. Offer to take her away, start over somewhere new. But she was afraid. Thornton had threatened to kill her if she ever tried to leave him. He stared into the flames. She promised to think about it, asked me to give her time. His voice grew rough. A week later, she was dead. Thornton claimed she fell down the stairs. No one questioned it. I'm so sorry, Daisy whispered, tears in her eyes. I confronted him, Griff said flatly. He laughed in my face. Said no one would believe a drifter over a respected businessman. He was right about that part. His hand clenched into a fist. We fought. He pulled a gun. I was faster. He looked up at Daisy, his eyes haunted. I've been on the move ever since. That was 8 years ago. Understanding dawned. You're wanted for his death. Griff nodded. In Massachusetts. But it was self-defense. I believe you, Daisy said without hesitation. You might be the only one who would, he replied with a sad smile. So now you know why I couldn't ride past when I saw you tied to that porch. Why I couldn't mind my own business. Daisy reached across the table and laid her hand on his. I'm glad you didn't. Their eyes met in the firelight, and something shifted between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who had both seen darkness, but refused to surrender to it. The moment was broken by a particularly loud crack of thunder that made them both start. Griff withdrew his hand and stood. We should get some sleep, he said, his voice gruff. Even with the delay, we should reach Silver Creek by tomorrow evening. Daisy nodded and moved to the narrow bed, while Griff spread his bedroll near the fire. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was slow to come. Her mind kept returning to Griff's story, to the pain he carried and the risk he was taking by helping her. She woke to gray dawn light filtering through the small window. The storm had passed, leaving behind a fresh, clean scent in the air. Griff was already up, checking on the horses and preparing a simple breakfast of coffee and the last of their provisions. Weather's cleared, he reported. We can make good time today. They set out as soon as they had eaten, the horses picking their way carefully along the muddy trail. By mid-morning, they had crested the ridge Griff had mentioned, and Daisy got her first glimpse of Silver Creek Valley spread out below them, a patchwork of forests, meadows, and the silver ribbon of the creek that gave the town its name. The town itself was visible in the distance, a collection of buildings nestled against the base of the mountains. It's beautiful, Daisy breathed. Wait until you see it up close, Griff replied with a small smile. The mountains behind it turned purple at sunset. They began their descent into the valley, the trail winding down through stands of pine and aspen. By early afternoon, They were riding through rolling meadows dotted with wildflowers, the mountains rising majestically behind them. As they drew closer to town, Daisy's nervousness returned. What will I tell people? About where I came from, why I'm here? The truth, as much of it as you're comfortable sharing, Griff advised. These are good people, but they've all got pasts of their own. They won't judge. The sun was indeed beginning to set, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold when they rode into Silver Creek. The town was larger than Daisy had expected. A proper main street lined with businesses, side streets with neat houses, a church with a white steeple, and a schoolhouse at the edge of town. People nodded greetings to Griff as they passed, eyeing Daisy with curiosity, but not hostility. He led them to a 2-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Silver Creek Hotel. Martha runs this place, Griff explained as they dismounted. She's a good woman. Straight-talking but fair. If anyone knows of work in town, it'll be her. A plump woman with iron gray hair appeared on the hotel porch as they approached. Griff Taylor, as I live and breathe, she called. Been wondering when you'd show your face again. Hello, Martha. Griff greeted her with a genuine smile. Got back sooner than expected. This is Daisy Lawrence. She's new to town, looking for work and a place to stay. Martha's shrewd eyes assessed Daisy quickly, but kindly. Well, you're in luck, dear. My girl Betsy just up and married the blacksmith's son last week, leaving me short-handed.
Can you cook?
Clean? Yes, madam, Daisy replied, hope rising within her. I'm a hard worker. She's also educated, Griff added. Was training to be a teacher before circumstances intervened. Martha's eyebrows rose with interest. Is that so? The school board's been looking for an assistant for Mr. Hopkins. He's getting on in years, poor man. Can barely control the younger children anymore. I'd be interested in that as well, Daisy said eagerly. Well, why don't you come in and we'll discuss it over supper, Martha suggested. You both look like you could use a hot meal and a proper bed. She turned to lead them inside, then paused. I've got a room at the back, private entrance. No questions asked. Room and board in exchange for work until you get on your feet. Daisy felt tears spring to her eyes at the woman's kindness. Thank you, she managed. Martha waved away her gratitude. Griff doesn't bring just anyone to my door. If he vouches for you, that's good enough for me. Inside, the hotel was clean and welcoming, with a dining room off the main lobby and a staircase leading to the upper floors. Martha showed Daisy to a small but comfortable room at the back of the building, with its own entrance as promised. Get cleaned up, she instructed. Supper's in an hour. We can talk more then. When Martha had gone, Daisy turned to Griff, who had carried her few belongings to the room. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. No need, he replied. Martha's right, you'll be an asset to this town. Will you stay? Daisy asked, suddenly afraid that he would leave now that he had delivered her safely. Griff hesitated. I have a cabin outside town. I come and go, guiding hunting parties, scouting for the army sometimes. But this is home. You'll come back? Something in her voice must have revealed her fear, for his expression softened. Yes, Daisy. I'll come back. Relief washed through her. Good, she said simply. He nodded, seemingly understanding all she couldn't say. I'll see you at supper. After he left, Daisy used the pitcher and basin provided to wash away the dust of travel. She changed into her cleanest dress, grateful that Martha hadn't seemed to notice or care about her limited wardrobe. The dining room was bustling when she came down, filled with hotel guests and locals who apparently came regularly for Martha's cooking. Griff was seated at a corner table, freshly washed and shaved, looking more civilized than she had yet seen him. Martha waved her over. There you are, dear. Come, sit. I've been telling Griff about the school situation. Over a hearty meal of roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread, Martha explained that the town's teacher, Mr. Hopkins, was nearly 70 and struggling to manage the growing number of students. The school board's been looking for someone to assist him, with an eye to taking over eventually when he retires, Martha said. They've sent to Denver for teachers, but no one wants to come this far out. A young woman with even some training would be welcome. I completed 2 years at the normal school in Illinois before my parents fell ill, Daisy explained. I never received my certificate, but I did study all the required subjects. That's more education than most in these parts, Martha assured her. I'll speak to Judge Wilson tomorrow. He heads the school board. In the meantime, she continued, you can help me here at the hotel. Room, board, and a small wage to start. How does that sound? It sounds wonderful, Daisy said sincerely. I can start tomorrow. Good girl. Martha patted her hand, then rose to attend to other customers. Left alone with Griff, Daisy felt suddenly shy. It seems too good to be true, she admitted. Finding work so quickly a place to stay. Martha's been looking for help for months, Griff told her. And the school situation is desperate. It's good timing, that's all. And Frank? What if he comes looking for me? Griff's expression hardened. Frank would have to find you first. And if he did, he'd have to get through me. And the rest of the town. He leaned forward. Silver Creek takes care of its own, Daisy. Once you're accepted here, you'll be protected. She wanted to believe him. After so long feeling vulnerable and alone, the idea of community, of protection, was almost too much to hope for. You should know, Griff said, his voice lowered. I'll be leaving tomorrow for a few days. The Army's asked me to scout a trail through the northern pass. I shouldn't be gone more than a week. Disappointment flooded Daisy, though she tried not to show it. I understand. You have work to do. Martha will look after you, he assured her. And I'll be back before you know it. Daisy nodded, forcing a smile. Of course. I'll be fine. The next morning, Griff left at dawn. Daisy watched from her window as he rode out, his tall figure straight in the saddle, until he disappeared from view. Then she squared her shoulders and went to find Martha. There was work to be done, a new life to build. The days passed quickly. Daisy threw herself into her duties at the hotel, cleaning rooms, helping in the kitchen, serving meals. Martha was a fair employer but expected hard work, which suited Daisy fine. The physical labor helped her sleep at night and kept her mind from dwelling too much on the past or on a certain hazel-eyed scout who had ridden away. True to her word, Martha spoke to Judge Wilson, and 3 days after Daisy's arrival in Silver Creek, she was summoned to meet with the school board. The meeting went better than she could have hoped. Mr. Hopkins, a kindly old gentleman with rheumy eyes and a scholar's stoop, asked her intelligent questions about her education and teaching philosophy. We have 32 students, he explained, ages 6 to 16. Too many for these old bones to manage alone anymore. He peered at her over his spectacles. Could you start Monday next? Just in the mornings to begin with. Daisy looked to Martha, who nodded her approval. I would be honored, she told Mr. Hopkins. And so a routine developed. Mornings at the school, helping Mr. Hopkins with the younger children, afternoons and evenings at the hotel. The townspeople were welcoming, if curious about the newcomer. Daisy offered a simplified version of her story, widowed recently, seeking a fresh start which seemed to satisfy most inquiries. 1 week stretched into 2, and still no sign of Griff. Daisy tried not to worry, telling herself that his work often took him away for extended periods. Martha assured her this was normal. That boy comes and goes like the wind, the older woman said fondly. But he always comes back. Silver Creek is the closest thing to home he's had in years. It was nearly 3 weeks after her arrival in Silver Creek when Daisy looked up from serving breakfast in the hotel dining room to see Griff standing in the doorway. He looked trail-worn and tired, but his eyes lit up when they found hers. Griff, Martha called, bustling over to greet him. About time you showed your face. Sit down, I'll bring you some breakfast. Daisy continued her work, suddenly conscious of her appearance, hair neatly pinned back, wearing a clean but faded dress with Martha's apron tied around her waist. When she finally made her way to his table, coffee pot in hand, she was composed enough to offer a smile. "Welcome back," she said, filling his cup. "Was your trip successful?" "Longer than expected," he replied, studying her face. "You look well. Settled." "I am," she admitted. "The town has been very welcoming. I'm helping at the school in the mornings now." A genuine smile spread across his face. "I heard, Mr. Hopkins is telling everyone who'll listen that the school board finally did something right, bringing you on." Daisy blushed at the praise. "He exaggerates. I have much to learn still." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Martha with a heaping plate of food for Griff. Daisy returned to her duties, but not before catching Griff's eyes following her as she moved about the room. That evening, after her work was done, Daisy found Griff waiting on the hotel's back porch, near her room. "I was hoping we might talk," he said, standing as she approached. "If you're not too tired." "Not at all," she replied, gesturing to the 2 chairs on the small porch. "Please sit." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the last light faded from the sky and the mountains darkened to silhouettes against the star-filled horizon. "I was worried when you didn't return after a week," Daisy admitted finally. "The job took longer than expected," Griff explained. "The northern pass had a rock slide. We had to find an alternate route." He turned to look at her. "I would have sent word if I could." "It's all right. Martha assured me this was normal for you." Griff chuckled. "Martha knows me too well." He paused. "I wanted to make sure you're truly doing all right here. That you're happy with your decision to come." "I am," Daisy said sincerely. "For the first time in so long, I feel
Safe.
useful. The children at the school are wonderful, and Martha has been more than kind." "And no word from Frank?" Daisy shook her head.
None.
"Do you think he'll try to find me?" "Hard to say. Men like that." Griff's jaw tightened. "Their pride gets wounded." "But he'd have to track us across difficult country, and from what I saw, he's not much of a woodsman." They fell silent again, but it was a comfortable silence, broken only by the distant sounds of the town settling for the night and the occasional call of a night bird. "I'm glad I found you that day," Griff said suddenly, his voice low, tied to that porch post. "I'm glad I didn't ride on by." "So am I," Daisy whispered, feeling tears threaten. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "You're stronger than you know," Griff told her, reaching out to cover her hand with his. "You would have found a way." The touch of his hand on hers sent warmth spreading through Daisy's body. She looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face, illuminated by the soft glow from the lantern hanging by her door. "Thank you for believing that," she said. "Even if I'm not sure I do." The weeks that followed fell into a pleasant rhythm. Griff came and went with his work, but never for as long as that first absence. When in town, he often took his meals at the hotel, sometimes lingering to talk with Daisy after her duties were complete. They would sit on the back porch, sharing stories of their days, careful at first, then with increasing openness. Daisy flourished in Silver Creek. Her work at the school expanded to full days as Mr. Hopkins recognized her talent with the children. The school board, impressed with her dedication, officially hired her as assistant teacher with a small but adequate salary. "You won't need to work at the hotel anymore," Martha said when Daisy shared the news. "Though I'll miss your help." "I'd like to continue helping in the evenings," Daisy replied. "It seems only fair, since I'm still taking a room here." Martha waved away her concern. "The room is yours for as long as you want it, help or no help. But if you insist on working, I won't turn you away." As summer gave way to autumn, Daisy became a true part of the community. She joined the Ladies' Aid Society, helped organize the Harvest Festival, and even began giving reading lessons to several adults in town who had never had the opportunity to learn. And through it all, there was Griff. Their friendship deepened with each conversation, each shared meal, each tentative confidence. Daisy found herself looking forward to his returns with increasing anticipation, missing him more acutely with each departure. One crisp October evening, they sat on their usual spot on the back porch, wrapped in warm shawls against the chill. Griff had returned that day from a hunting expedition, bringing venison for the hotel kitchen. "Winter will come early this year," he observed, looking at the mountains where snow already capped the highest peaks. "I can feel it in the air." "Will you stay in town for the winter?" Daisy asked, trying to sound casual. "Mostly. The passes get too dangerous for guiding once the heavy snows come." He glanced at her. "Why do you ask?" Daisy busied herself adjusting her shawl. "Just curious about your plans." Griff studied her face in the lantern light. "Daisy," he said softly, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." Her heart quickened. "Yes. The harvest dance is next Saturday. Would you consider attending with me?" The harvest dance was Silver Creek's biggest social event of the fall, a time when the whole community gathered to celebrate before the isolation of winter set in. Going together would be a public declaration of something. What exactly, Daisy wasn't sure. "I'd like that," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Griff's smile was warm, relieved.
Good.
"That's good." The night of the dance arrived clear and cold. Daisy had used some of her first teacher's wages to purchase fabric for a new dress, a deep blue wool that Martha had helped her sew. She pinned her hair up more elaborately than usual and allowed herself a touch of the rose-scented water that one of the hotel guests had given her as thanks for extra blankets during a particularly cold night. When she emerged from her room to find Griff waiting, his reaction made the effort worthwhile. He stood speechless for a moment, his eyes taking in her appearance. "You look beautiful," he finally said, offering his arm. The town hall was transformed for the occasion with autumn decorations, dried corn stalks, pumpkins, and colorful leaves adorning every surface. A small band played lively tunes, and tables laden with food lined one wall. It seemed the entire town had turned out for the celebration. Daisy was aware of curious glances and approving smiles as she entered on Griff's arm. By now, most knew some version of how she had come to Silver Creek, though the full truth of her escape from Frank remained between her, Griff, and Martha. "Miss Lawrence." Several of her students rushed up to greet her, eyes wide at seeing their teacher in such finery. "Good evening," she replied warmly. "Are you enjoying the dance?" As the children chattered excitedly, Daisy was aware of Griff watching her with a soft expression that made her cheeks warm. The evening passed in a pleasant blur of conversation, laughter, and dancing. Griff proved to be a capable dancer, guiding Daisy through waltzes and reels with surprising grace for such a large man. During a break in the music, they stepped outside for some fresh air. The night was clear, stars brilliant in the black sky above. "Are you cold?" Griff asked, noticing Daisy's slight shiver. "A little," she admitted. He removed his coat and placed it around her shoulders, just as he had done that night in the wilderness months ago. The gesture brought back memories, but this time there was no fear, no uncertainty, only warmth and a growing feeling that Daisy was hesitant to name. "Daisy," Griff began, his voice unusually hesitant. "These past months, seeing you build a life here, watching you grow stronger each day. It's been a privilege." She looked up at him, heart pounding. "It's because of you that I had the chance." He shook his head. "You would have found your way. You're remarkably resilient." "Perhaps," she allowed. "But I'm glad it was your path I crossed." Griff took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "I've been alone a long time. After Grace died, I didn't let myself get close to anyone. It was safer that way." Daisy waited, sensing there was more he needed to say. "But then I found you, tied to that porch, defiant despite everything." He looked down at her, his eyes intense in the moonlight. You changed something in me, Daisy. Made me want to stop running. Made me want to build something. Here in Silver Creek. What are you saying, Griff? Daisy whispered, hardly daring to hope. I'm saying that I care for you.
Deeply.
More than I thought possible. He took her hands in his. I know it's too soon. You've been through so much, and you're just finding your feet. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know. Tears sprang to Daisy's eyes, but they were tears of joy. It's not too soon, she said softly. I care for you too. Have for some time now. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Daisy responded with a certainty that surprised them both, her hands coming up to rest on his chest as the kiss deepened. When they finally parted, both were breathing unevenly. Well, Griff said, his voice rough. I guess that settles that. Daisy laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. I guess it does. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Daisy's life. Her relationship with Griff grew steadily, built on the foundation of trust and respect they had established. They kept things proper. Silver Creek might be progressive in many ways, but it was still a small western town with certain expectations. Griff courted her formally, calling at the hotel to take her for walks, bringing small gifts when he returned from his increasingly rare travels, a ribbon from the trading post, wildflower honey from a farmer's wife, a book of poetry he had traded for with a passing salesman. As winter settled in earnest over Silver Creek, Griff spent more time in town. He helped with repairs at the school, chopped firewood for Martha's hotel, and occasionally substituted for the sheriff when the man needed to travel to the county seat. Christmas came, bringing with it the town's traditional celebrations. Daisy helped her students put on a pageant, tears in her eyes as the children recited the pieces she had taught them. Griff sat in the front row, his proud smile warming her more than the roaring fire in the schoolhouse stove. That evening, after the community dinner at the church, they walked back to the hotel through gently falling snow. I have something for you, Griff said, reaching into his pocket. A Christmas gift. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Daisy unwrapped it carefully to find a delicate silver locket. Oh, Griff, she breathed. It's beautiful. Open it, he urged. Inside was a tiny portrait of her parents, painstakingly copied from the worn photograph she kept in her treasure box. How did you? Martha helped, he admitted. She borrowed the photograph when you were at school one day. A traveling artist made the copy. Tears spilled down Daisy's cheeks. This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me. Griff gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. You carry them in your heart. Now you can carry them with you always. Daisy reached up to kiss him, pouring all her emotion into the gesture. When they parted, both were breathless. I love you, Daisy Lawrence, Griff said simply. And I love you, Griffin Taylor, she replied, the words feeling right, natural, inevitable. New Year's Day, 1876, dawned clear and cold. Daisy woke to a knock at her door. Opening it, she found Martha standing there with a peculiar expression, part excitement, part exasperation. That man of yours is out front with a wagon, Martha announced. Says he has something to show you. Better bundle up, it's freezing out there. Curious, Daisy dressed quickly in her warmest clothes and made her way to the front of the hotel. Griff was indeed waiting with a wagon, a heavy blanket spread over the seat. Good morning, he greeted her with a kiss. Care for a ride? Where are we going? Daisy asked as he helped her up onto the seat. You'll see, was all he would say, tucking the blanket around her legs before climbing up beside her. They drove through town and out along the creek road, the snow-covered landscape glittering in the morning sunlight. After about 20 minutes, Griff turned onto a smaller track that wound up into the foothills. Your cabin? Daisy guessed, recognizing the general direction. Griff nodded, a hint of nervousness in his expression that intrigued her. She had never seen his home, though she knew approximately where it was located. The cabin came into view as they rounded a bend larger than she had expected, set in a clearing with a small barn alongside. Smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting someone was there. "I asked Martha to send Billy out earlier to start the fire," Griff explained as he helped her down from the wagon. "Didn't want it to be cold for your first visit." The cabin was rustic but well-built, with a covered porch across the front and solid timber walls that would withstand the harshest winter. Inside, Daisy found a surprisingly comfortable space, a large main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area with a proper stove, a table and chairs, and sturdy furniture including a rocking chair placed near the fire. "Griff, it's lovely," she said, turning to take it all in. "So much larger than I imagined." "I built it myself," he said, watching her reaction carefully. "Over the past 2 years. Added to it each time I returned to Silver Creek." "You built all this?" Daisy was impressed. The craftsmanship was excellent, the proportions pleasing. "I was apprenticed to a carpenter before I had to leave Massachusetts," he explained. "The skills stayed with me." He showed her around a pantry stocked with preserved foods, a bedroom with a large bed frame he had crafted himself, even a small second room that he described as for guests or whatever might be needed. There was something in his manner, attention, an expectancy that made Daisy suspect this was more than a simple tour of his home. "Griff," she said gently, taking his hands in hers. "Why did you bring me here today?" He took a deep breath. "I wanted you to see it. To see what I've built here. What could be ours." Her heart began to race. "Ours?" "Daisy Lawrence," he said, sinking to one knee before her. "I know we haven't known each other long by some standards, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold band. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Joy surged through Daisy, so intense it was almost painful. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Griff. Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and rose to pull her into his arms. Their kiss was a promise, a beginning, a homecoming. "There's more," he said when they finally parted. "If you're willing to hear it." "More?" Daisy laughed, dizzy with happiness. What more could there be? A plan. A future. He led her to sit by the fire. "I've been saving for my guide work all these years. There's enough to buy the parcel adjoining this land, another 100 acres. Enough to start a small ranch." A ranch. This was unexpected. "But your work as a guide is no way to support a family," he finished. "I've been thinking about this for a while, even before I met you. I'm getting older, and the mountains get harder each year. A small ranch, horses, maybe some cattle, would be more stable. And you could still teach if you wanted." Daisy considered the idea, picturing their life together in this cabin, expanding it as their family grew, building something permanent. After years of uncertainty, the vision was powerfully appealing. "It sounds perfect," she said honestly. "All of it." They were married in the Silver Creek church on a bright February morning, with the whole town in attendance. Martha insisted on hosting the celebration at the hotel, declaring herself practically family to both bride and groom. Mr. Hopkins gave Daisy away, his roomy eyes wet with emotion as he placed her hand in Griff's. Judge Wilson performed the ceremony, his booming voice filling the small church as he pronounced them husband and wife. Daisy wore a new dress of cream-colored wool, with Martha's lace shawl as her something borrowed. The silver locket Griff had given her for Christmas hung around her neck, carrying her parents' images close to her heart on this special day. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and more food than even the hungriest rancher could consume. When it was finally time to leave, the townspeople lined the street to wave goodbye as Griff drove Daisy home to their cabin, their home. Spring brought new beginnings. Griff purchased the adjoining land as planned and began the process of establishing their small ranch. He bought 4 mares from a breeder in the next county, along with a stallion with impressive bloodlines, the foundation of what he hoped would become a respected horse breeding operation. Daisy continued teaching, riding to and from town on the gentle mare Griff had given her as a wedding gift. In the evenings, they worked together on improvements to the cabin, adding curtains, building shelves, creating a home that reflected both their tastes. Summer found them settled into a comfortable routine. The horses were thriving, the small vegetable garden Daisy had planted was producing abundantly, and the cabin had become a true home. They often hosted dinner for friends from town. Martha, Mr. Hopkins, the sheriff, and his wife, their table always welcoming. It was on a warm August evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple, that Daisy shared her news. "I visited Dr. Simmons today," she said, her hand finding Griff's. "We're going to have a baby." The joy that spread across his face was everything she had hoped for. He gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "When?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Early spring. March, the doctor thinks." "A baby," Griff whispered, his hand gently touching her still, flat stomach. "Our baby." The months that followed were filled with preparations. Griff threw himself into converting the small second bedroom into a nursery, crafting a cradle from pine harvested from their own land. Daisy sewed tiny garments in the evenings, her heart full as she imagined the child who would wear them. Winter came, harsher than the previous year. Heavy snows isolated the homesteads around Silver Creek for weeks at a time. Daisy temporarily stopped teaching as her pregnancy advanced, focusing on preparing for the baby's arrival. It was during one such snowbound week, with drifts piled high around the cabin and the wind howling outside, that Daisy noticed Griff's unusual restlessness. "What's troubling you?" she asked as they sat by the fire after dinner. "You've been pacing all day." He hesitated, then sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you before we married." Alarm flickered through Daisy. "What is it?" "My name," he said quietly. "Griff Taylor isn't my real name." Daisy stared at him, unsure how to respond. "After what happened with Thornton, my sister's husband, I needed to disappear," he explained. "I took my mother's maiden name. My real name is Griffin Thompson." "Thompson," Daisy repeated, testing the sound of it. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because our child deserves to know their true name," he said. "And because I'm tired of running, of hiding." He squeezed her hands. "I've written to a lawyer in Boston. After all this time, with Thornton's reputation eventually revealed as less than sterling, there's a chance the case against me could be reconsidered. Especially with testimony about his treatment of Grace." "You want to clear your name," Daisy realized. "For our child's sake," Griff nodded. "So they never have to wonder, to hide." Daisy reached up to touch his face. "Then we'll do it together. Thompson is a fine name." Relief washed over his features. "You're not angry that I kept this from you?" "How could I be?" she asked gently. "You were protecting yourself, and later, protecting me. But you're right. It's time to stop running." The lawyer's response came in late February, carried by a male rider who braved the snow-clogged passes. The news was better than they had dared hope. New evidence had come to light about Joseph Thornton's character and history of violence. The case against Griff would be reviewed, with a strong possibility of the charges being dropped entirely due to self-defense. "Would you have to go back?" Daisy asked, one hand resting on her now prominent belly. "Eventually to give testimony," Griff replied. "But not until after the baby comes. Not until you're both ready for such a journey." March arrived with the first hints of spring snow melting in patches to reveal tender green shoots beneath, creeks swollen with runoff, birds returning to build nests in the eaves of the cabin. Daisy's time came during a gentle spring rain. Martha, who had ridden out to stay with them for the final weeks of the pregnancy, took charge with calm efficiency, sending Griff to boil water and fetch clean linens while she helped Daisy through the early stages of labor. The birth was long but uncomplicated. As dawn broke on a clear morning, their daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that made both parents laugh through their tears. "She has your strength," Griff murmured, cradling the tiny bundle with awe. "And your beauty." "And your eyes," Daisy observed, noting the distinctive hazel color already evident in the newborn's gaze. They named her Grace, after the aunt she would never meet but whose story had, in so many ways, led to her existence. Grace Martha Thompson, her full name acknowledging both the past and the present, honoring those who had been lost and those who had helped create this new family. Summer brought the final resolution to Griff's legal troubles. A letter arrived from the Boston lawyer, bearing the official notification that all charges had been dismissed. Griffin Thompson was a free man, his name cleared, his past finally laid to rest. "We should visit Boston someday," Daisy suggested as they celebrated the news. "Show Grace where her father came from." "Someday," Griff agreed, watching their daughter sleep in her cradle. "But not yet. For now, this is where we belong."
And it was true.
Silver Creek had given them both a second chance, Daisy escaping a life of abuse, Griff finding a home after years of wandering. The small ranch was flourishing, their first foals already showing promise. The cabin had expanded to include a proper kitchen and a larger bedroom. Daisy had returned to teaching part-time, bringing Grace with her to the delight of her students. On warm evenings, they still sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains. But now they were three, little Grace cooing in her mother's arms or sleeping against her father's broad chest. "Do you ever think about that day?" Daisy asked once, as they watched a particularly spectacular sunset. "When you found me tied to that porch?" Griff's arm tightened around her shoulders.
Sometimes.
"I think about how close I came to riding past. How different our lives would be if I had." "I was so afraid," Daisy admitted. "But something in me refused to break, refused to give in to Frank's cruelty. That's what drew me to you," Griff said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That strength, that fire. And here we are," Daisy marveled, looking down at their sleeping daughter. "A family, a home, a future," Griff added softly. As twilight deepened into night, stars appearing one by one in the vast Montana sky, Daisy reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From fear to freedom, from loneliness to love, from despair to hope. All because one day, a cowboy had stopped to help a woman in need and said those simple, life-changing words, "I'll cook, you rest." She leaned against her husband's solid presence, their daughter warm between them, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, not tied to a porch, but bound by love to the family and home they had created together.